Hello and welcome to another edition of the program Total Woman on AD4 TV Radio. My name is Muti Olori. Today we'll be talking about child abuse. Child abuse, as many may think, it is not just physical violence directed at a child. It is any form of maltreatment by an adult which is violence or threatening for the child. And this includes child labor and even neglect. When child abuse occurs in the home and the abuser is, for example, the child's parents or caregiver, this is a form of domestic violence too. So children are sometimes abused by other adults on whom they are dependent, such as in a nursery or a nursery worker, a teacher, a sports coach, you name it. According to World Health Organization, globally, it is estimated that up to 1 billion children aged 2 to 17 years experience physical, sexual, or emotional violence or neglect. A data from 3 new studies published by the African Partnership to End Violence Against Children, released at Together to End Violence affiliates on July 22nd, 2021, proves that more than half of all the children in Africa experience physical abuse, while in some parts of the continent, 4 in 10 girls suffer from sexual violence before the age of 15. Because this act is often perpetrated by parents, guardians, or caregivers, most of them go unreported. Child abuse can have long-term consequences, often causing stress that is associated with disruption in early brain development. Yes, in fact, extreme stress can impair the development of the nervous and immune system of a child. So adults who have been abused as children are at an increased risk of behavioral, physical, and mental health problems. Some children do not survive to become adults. So on today's episode, like I said, we are set to distinguish between what is child discipline from child abuse, as many parents actually mistake abuse for discipline. And with me on the program today is a woman whose vision is driven by her passion to advocate for the rights of vulnerable women and children in the society. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Child Care and Adult Protection Initiative. Evelyn Oti is my guest today. You're welcome on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, why advocacy for children, vulnerable children and women? Maybe I'll start from there.
When you look at our world today, especially Nigeria, our children are suffering in different aspects. Our schools are no longer safe, even the homes. And it's pathetic enough to learn that even the parents are also abusing their children. Not just the usual domestic violence of probably you beat a child and you hurt that child. It now goes further to sexual abuse by either the father or the mother. But most times the news we get is fathers abusing their daughters. And when you check out the age range, I mean, it's really traumatizing. A girl child of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years is made to suck the father's private part. I mean, this is appalling. So when you look at other aspects, apart from the home, the school which we've mentioned, the church is also there. So we just thought that something should be done about this. And CAPI, which is the name of my organization, Child Care Adult Protection Initiative, we are all out to advocate against every form of abuse perpetrated on a child.
Thank you so much. And really, you're very passionate about it. Now, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't know the difference between child abuse and child discipline. But in terms, because I hear things like, oh, this is Africa, this is Nigeria, we have our ways, we are not westernized, we're not this. Can you elaborate more. Exactly what is child abuse?
For us parents, most times we use, or let's say we are misled by the Bible quotation that says, spare the rod and spoil the child. Yes, spare the rod and spoil the child means you should discipline that child. But there are different methods of discipline. You should understand where it is getting out of hand, where the child becomes, or probably the child is getting distressed, or the child is hurt. Any form, any action perpetrated by an individual or an institution that puts that child in distress and fails to help that child develop properly into adulthood is an abuse. But let me cite an instance here. My little boy, that was when he was about 4 years old. He was asked to do something at home to help himself put his clothes together, and he failed to do that. And he was asked to perform another chore, and he failed to do that. I said, no problem at all. But be rest assured that you were going to school today without your snacks. And I meant it. So his school is a type that every child, you bring your snacks to school, and when it's time to eat, every child you display your snacks, and you have what you have brought. And when it was time for that, my son had nothing to show, and every other child was eating. And when I went back to pick him, and the teacher approached me, what happened? Julius had nothing today to eat. Every other child had their juice, their biscuit. I said, yes, because he did something wrong. So you could as well talk to him that next time, if he doesn't want to be left out, he needs to do what he needs to do, or he needs to do what he's been asked to do. And since that day, it never repeated, because he knows that depriving him of snacks when every other person is having theirs is not a good thing for him in school.
Okay, when is it abuse? Because the society we live in, Nigeria, we know about the economic situation, we know about the living condition about a lot of families. We used to have what we call the bourgeois, the middle class, and the poor, but now we don't even have middle class, or even the bourgeois are now the middle class, if you want to say that. So what would you say if a parent says to a child, you need to go sell, you need to go hawk after school, or you need to find a way to support the family, so that is that child abuse? Or when I really want us to define, because within the context of what is happening and the reality of where we are now, what would you really say is child
abuse when it comes to that? Okay, now a child helping the parents or duties assigned to a child is different from child labor. So let me define this. In an instance where you have a mother, probably she's a widow and she just got one child and she's selling to make a living. Yes, that child can support in her business. There's nothing wrong about that. But an instance where that child is put under risk, that it becomes an abuse. Now, we had to handle a case where a father, nothing is wrong with him. He's still within the age of working. He goes to work actually and comes back home, but was not providing for the home. And he expected the child to go sell groundnut on the particular day. And the child said she couldn't, probably because of what she had encountered out there. And this child was beaten and was threatened that if she does not sell that groundnut, there'll be no food for her and all of that. So of course she went out, sold, and she didn't come back with any good report. So this had been going on until that child had to report to us. So in that instance, you could say that you, the parents, you are actually in the position to provide for the family. So why would you put the responsibility on the child, causing the child more risk and harm? That's wrong. But in an instance where I am in a shop, I'm selling, I have my girl child or my boy child supporting me with what I am doing. It's as good as me being in the kitchen and my children are supporting me. They are under my watch at that time. Our society, our communities these days, they are not safe enough for you to trust a tray of pineapple or some kind of fruits or granules or whatever you may call it and say, go up the street and sell and bring money. Anything can happen to that child. It could be kidnapped, it could be rape, anything at all. And let me also cite an instance. There was a day I was driving through the quarters where we live, and I saw a child lying on the floor, on the ground actually, and most cars had dodged that child. I think it was a boy of about 7 or 8 years old. So I parked. After I dodged him, actually, I parked and I came down. I walked up to him. Why are you lying on the ground? And he said he's afraid of going home. And I said, why? And that the fufu I was selling, one auntie came and bought everything and said, you don't have change, you're looking for change. I have not seen the person again. So that child is traumatized at that time. When he goes home, what could be the consequence? And he was doing that without the watch of the mom or the dad or any guardians at all. And there was one other case we had to handle. This was really pathetic. A girl of 9, she went out to sell the usual fufu. That was on a Sunday. And a customer bought that fufu for 1,000 naira. That 1,000 naira actually bought everything. But the person said the child should return about the next day or 2 days' time to get the money.
Wow.
So this girl, this 9-year-old, went back to the parents and reported. Now, she was not staying with the parents, she was staying with the aunt. And when she reported the case to the aunt's husband got an iron, put the iron in fire, and beat her all over her back. So by the time she was brought to my office, her back was battered with iron bonds. And when we had to take the case further, because we got the police to arrest the uncle, and the uncle said she's a bad child, that he never trusted what she said. But did that warrant you
to beat the child? Yes, like that.
So there are different forms of this. So in that case, we had to look for a way of contacting the girl's parents in Lagos and reuniting her with the parents. So you can imagine that child growing into adulthood and remembering what happened to her, what transpired. I don't think she will have any good record or any story.
So some of our parenting actually is as a result of the trauma that we have been through when we are growing up. So now we've been able to identify certain things, from our discussion, that there is a thin line between correction and abuse. Even when the child is helpful, the minute you expose the child to certain risk, that would lead to them being abused by one form, or your inability to function in your responsibility as a parent or a guide, and you leave this responsibility to the child. Not only that, you create certain expectation for the child. Not only that, you beat the child, you inflict hurt, wound on the child if those responsibilities are not met that originally have to be yours. So there is really a thin line between correction and abuse.
Yes, and if you ask me, that line is not so thin, because every child has a right to be listened to, and every child has a right to speak. So for instance, if a child does something and probably you misunderstood it, at least give that child opportunity to explain. We've had so many cases where a mother or a father misunderstood the child and just went beating the child all over. And when we said, okay, hold on, did you even ask the child what happened?
Don't mind this child, is always a liar.
That time you ask the child, you don't need to say
anything anymore. Yes.
But that child can actually talk to someone else outside and you don't know who the person is. So unfortunately for us Africans, yes, I know there are some mothers who understand this, that there are several methods, that can be applied to correct a child. And one of them is patience. You just have to be patient with the children.
You've got to be patient with me, because I'll take a short break and then I'll be right back. All right, we'll take a short break. It's still Total Woman on AD4 TV Radio, and my guest, Evelyn Oti, a child and adult advocates. We've been talking about child abuse, the thin line between correcting a child and abusing a child, and I'm sure that you've been enjoying our conversation. Please don't touch that dial. I'll be right back.
I am a total woman. I am a total woman. Oh, I am a total woman.
Welcome back. Wow, my guest. We've been talking about child abuse, and I really want to know, though we mentioned it briefly in our conversation, what are the consequences of child abuse first on the child and environment and society, judging from the cases you've come across with? What are the consequences of child abuse? Because sometimes we just say, they are children, they will grow out of it. I've heard a lot of that. They will grow out of it. No, they don't understand. Or some will say they need to be taught this way so that when they grow up, they will not carry on with this unacceptable behavior and all that. Actually, in cases where the children actually are wrong. So what are the consequences on them, the environment and society?
Okay, thank you once again. Yeah, when you talk about disciplining a child, we also know that there's this thin line between discipline, between correcting the child and abusing that child. So when it goes beyond correction, it will always leave a mark somewhere. Yes, there are some form of abuse or hurt that a child can come out of growing into adults. In short, I've heard some adults now say, thank God my father really gave me good beatings. Thank God my mom beat me. That's why I am what I am today. But there are some that leaves that mark, and at the end of the day, it has adverse effects on the society, the community where they live. Let me cite an instance. There was a case of a young man who was abused by the housemaid without the knowledge of his mother.
Yeah.
Yes. And it went on until this little boy, he started at 3 when he was 3 years, and he continued until he was 14. And this was sexual abuse going on. And this young man did everything he could to leave home because he thought that school education was the only remedy. And why that came to his mind was that each time he goes to school, he was boarding. The housemaid was not there to abuse him. But when he comes back on holidays, it will continue until it's time to go back to school. So he did everything possible and got admission to university in his teens. He was exposed to sex early. So at the end of the day, he had a child in his year 1.
Wow.
So you can imagine somebody at that age. And the girl he impregnated couldn't trust him well enough to take care of both herself and the baby in terms of getting married to him. So there was this tussle between two families. You know what the girl did? He was in hostel. She just picked the little boy, went, dumped with the father, and she left. So you can see what happened right from when he was a baby and the consequences and all of that. And it now got to a point where he had to trace that woman, and he said he was ready to kidnap her, kill her, do anything to her. The housemaid, although she was comfortable and all of that. So you can see how these things play out. So it could lead to kidnap, could lead to anything, could lead to crime. And there was another case of a little boy. We had to save him from suicide because his mom never knew what was going on. His mom was a single parent, very hardworking, doing her best to put the family together. She had 3 children, and she would leave the 3 children with her friend whom she trusted so much. So this her friend was abusing the boy sexually. The boy was very intelligent in school, but got to a point where he could no longer pass his exams. And a fellow child in school walked up to him and asked him, what's going on? You've been so withdrawn these days. You're no longer having your snacks and all of that. What's going on? And he said, I'll tell you. And this little girl, insisted, she persisted until he now said he wants to commit suicide. He was a boy of 7 years old. And when she asked, now said, Auntie so-and-so has been abusing me, and she said I shouldn't tell anybody because the day I do, she'll kill me. And then he's tired. So there are a whole lot of consequences, even for the girl child too. There are some that grow up to be very disrespectful to their parents, to their mom especially, because they feel they have been abused in one way or the other, but the mom was not there. Let's take the story of Joyce Meyer, for instance. I believe we all know her story. Fine. she grew up having some form of hatred for the parents, especially the mom, because she was abused and the mom never did anything about it. So yes, it has its own consequences, but these are things that we try to encourage people that you can overcome. That psychological trauma can be dealt with. We have different counselors out there from NGOs and even governmental organizations or agencies that can actually provide support.
Imagine the case of a father abusing his own child.
daughter, yeah.
You know, for the case of others, you can say, okay, get the child out of the house, you know, reunite the child with the parents. But this is the parents doing it. Like Josmia's case, she knew, the mother knew, but she was saving her marriage. The same thing happened with the other lady, what's her name now? The media guru, I can't fix her name now. But the same thing happened. So we have cases of, people were able to come out of it. But till today, she cannot find herself being
married in a happily married home
because of
the
this
consequences.
She to have a partner,
Yeah.
which is becoming common in our society.
That's what probably feel, right? Yes.
So it's common now. We have cases of baby mama, baby papa. Everybody is comfortable with not going through this whole family thing because certain level of abuse, neglect
goes
were there when we were growing up. So this is beginning to form their perspective about what life and society should be like. So how do we?
I think there's no limit to awareness creation here. There's no limit to advocacy. Every home, every child in every home should understand that when I'm abused, I need to talk to somebody about it. You can talk to the counselors in your school. You can approach an NGO out there. There was a case we had to handle in Benue State. I was so happy it happened that way. Most times, 16 days of activism, it's for the girl child and the women. So this particular outreach was carried out by another organization in Benue State. I'm sorry I had to mention the name of the state. And this was a case of a boy. Now, that outreach was for a school. So in the school, you have both girls and boys. And a 16-year-old boy walked up to the lady after the presentation and said, "Can I have a word with you?" And she said, yes. "Well, not here, privately." And he said he's been abused sexually several times by a married man, anal sex, and it's been going on. And we had to step in, and we discovered that it's not just the man doing this. And it's gotten to a point where the boy's rectum was weak. He could no longer hold physics. He needed medical attention, but his guardians at home never knew. And to make it worse, he was HIV positive from birth. And the person abusing him had no idea. So we had to work in collaboration with NAPTIP to arrest that case. But I was happy that the boy was given proper treatment immediately. His family was called and something was done about it. So you have so many of them out there. So driving home that awareness goes a long way to help. You could be saving a life, or probably lives, you know, because you can imagine that boy growing into his 20s and 30s and growing with that kind of abuse. I mean, he could take to the streets, he could decide to be anything he wanted to be because he just feels no one was paying that attention he needed, you know. So that awareness creation, advocacy, there should be no limitations to it. Every child, we tell them that if you feel you're abused, please, it's not your fault. Don't take the blame. Talk to somebody about it, and there should be some form of help to get you out of the situation.
So you and I, what will be our own responsibility apart from government or in such agencies we're working as individuals?
Okay, what we're doing right now is awareness creation through this program. Yes, so we could do more of this. We could also advocate to the government to drive home more awareness in schools. And also there should be consequences placed on anyone who is caught doing this. Parents, institutions, and because this thing around abuse going on in schools these days, sometimes I wonder, how does it end? What does the government do about it?
Thank you so much for having this conversation with us on the program. Looking at it, actually, I'm sure that those of them perpetrating these kind of behaviors as teachers must have had their own experience as child, and then, you know, mentally, psychologically, it's been there, but they never knew. And today it snaps and they begin to have such unacceptable behavior. But you and I, you know, can do something about it. And there's this slogan that says, see something, say something. And not only see something, say something. When you see something, do something. Thank you so much for being my guest today. See, together we have the power to protect children from all forms of violence by taking holistic approach to help vulnerable children regain their economic, social, and cultural, civic, and political rights. You think they don't have? They do have the right. Every child matter, and every child has a right. And I pray and hope that every state in Nigeria will be able to make sure that the child's rights, it's being not only passed but practiced, because policy is one thing, application of policy is another thing. Let's find proper way of handling and punishing perpetrators. We have the child abuse register. We have the name and shame. There's so much more we can do as individuals and as society. I'll be with you again next week with another guest and another issue on Total Woman. But please say something when you see something and do something. My name is Muti Olori. See you next week. Bye-bye.